Okay, I'm going to move back here just a second and look at this date because people always ask, well, when did you go? We went in August of 2019. They were having a heat wave up to 80. Can you believe it? So that coming from Texas, that felt pretty good actually. So where is Nova Scotia? It is off the coast of Canada, as you see in Atlantic time. It's part of the Maritime provinces, which include New Brunswick, PEI, Prince Edward Island, Newfoundland up here, Labrador, and Nova Scotia. Here's New Brunswick right here. So it's these, looks like two big islands. Actually, it's lots of islands. And it's part of the Appalachians, actually. It's this little isthmus is joined to New Brunswick right here. But yeah, these green parts are mountainous or low hills, anyway. And many indented little places for sailboats. You know, see lots of boats, lots of bays and coves and inlets. Also a few beaches, lots of rocks, saltwater marshes. The Cape Breton Island is this part of Nova Scotia, and it's joined here to the mainland. It is an island, but it's with a small strait across it and a bridge. So this was the visitor center to Cape Breton. I love the branches growing out of her. You see she was carved out of a tree. And the visitor center, of course, being August, they have lots of flowers, which is always nice. And you'll see boat models just everywhere through here. We went on a caravan tour, caravan not being a house that you drag along, but the Caravan Tour company. And this little girl was the youngest person on our trip. She really brought down the age average. Her mom,
Oh, hold on.
her mom
Okay.
and her friend's mom won some prize on one of the talk shows. I mean, I'm sorry, it wasn't Jeopardy, but it was one of the other ones. So anyway, there were two families that had young children on this trip, which was different. The rest of us were, you know, old folks. So the Cape Breton Center just had a few things to see. We really began our tour in Shetty Camp, which is a very small town where what you'll see it is just along the shore. Not very big. There's a little bit of an island right next to it, and that's where they put their cows in the summertime. They put a gate up here. They don't have to fence it, which is a good deal. So that you see down at the bottom, it was settled in 1785 by 14 Acadian settlers. The Acadians, of course, being French. Population about 3,000, and now it's just pretty much fishing and tourism. This is a view of the town from the Cow Island. And a little bit of the hills already down the street. Nothing much to look at, a little harbor. Not very big population. This little place, it looks like a lighthouse, is one of the restaurants, and we'll see the lobster pots all over. This one decorated with the flag of Canada. One nice, very, very nice church in here, a Catholic church, St. Peter's. So we visited two places in Shetty Camp that were very worth going to. Les Trois Pignons, which is the rug museum, or the tapestry museum, is another way to pronounce it, I guess. So we had a guided tour through here. Some things from the Acadian culture and old kinds of places.
Mm.
These rugs are hook rugs, as opposed to the kind that are done on looms with the shuttle back and forth. So these are all hook rugs. And just to see, some are pictures, some are, you can see it up close, some are just patterns. But they did have other things in the rug museum as well. But some beautiful things in there. This one in particular was one that was a huge rug that was done, a little bit more about it, designed by Lillian Burke, who designed a lot of these beautiful rugs. It says the largest rug produced in Shetty Camp was the largest hand-hook rug ever made, measuring 18 by 36 feet. And it took these ladies 3 months, as she drew up the design and put it on the canvas backing and set up in a barn. 9 women worked 11 hours a day for 6 months to hook and finish it. So right now they don't know where this rug is, but it did gain some press when it was made. So here are a few others that Miss Burke designed. Bicentennial of Shetty Camp in 1985, and some others that are pictures. These are some of the American presidents. She only got as far as Kennedy. And some historic events. As I say, there are other things in the Rug Museum in addition to the rugs that they have, like pottery and different things that were used in the home. This little pump organ. You'll see a lot of these things in the slides I'm doing, so I don't want to dwell on them too far, but if you have something that interests you, just let me know and I can go back and stop and have you have a look. Maybe Grandma had one of those. The other interesting museum we went there was the Mask Museum. Some of these were real people with masks wandering around and entertaining the visitors, but a lot of them, of course, were on the walls. And it's amazing how many different kinds of masks there are. They were kind of fun to see, and these were some people dressed up. I think this was, I want this one for Mardi Gras myself. Here's a lady in one of the masks. So we then began, after our night in Shetty Camp, began driving on the Cabot Trail, which runs north from Shetty Camp. And the Cabot Trail is a highway, or a road, I might say, a 185-mile loop around the northern part of Cape Breton Island. And the northern part is a national park. And it's named after John Cabot. But actually, he didn't land in Nova Scotia. He probably landed in Newfoundland, not Cape Breton Island. However, the trail is named after him. The trail we're talking about would be this part. And this is the national park area. You see that we did visit this part, and we came down here to Bedeck, and we'll get down to that later. So driving along, we see how mountainous it is on this part of the island. And in fall, the leaves turn red and yellow in places, so that would be on my wish list to go back in fall and see, even in the cruise maybe, to see what the colors look like. They're supposed to be a beautiful sight in fall. So winding highways, wildflowers, what was on there? Scenic outlets, beaches, helicopter tours. You can go up and go hiking, canoeing. You can see there are lots of rivers and lakes. And our first stop here was at the French Mountain Bog, actually a fen, which we're going to find out what is the difference. So it's about 1,350 feet above sea level. So we've got this mountainous part and like a swamp on top. And it's a typical Highland wetland, as you might find out. You'll see everything in French on the other side. These plants grow in these highland bogs and nowhere else, but they do have severe heat and cold, and particularly a lot of wind in the wintertime. Not very good soil. You'll see this kind of soil also, sphagnum moss in Ireland, that become peat bogs as they settle down. And in Ireland, they dig up this peat and dry it and burn it in the fireplace. But these are like sponges. They sponge up the water, and eventually, if they don't have water, they will dry out. So the bogs look like this, and they are have these walkways through because this is very swampy water. So about the fens, this bog is more accurately called a slope fen because the drainage isn't very good. This is a cool, wet climate. So the bogs receive all their moisture from the rain. There's not any water coming from below. It's from the fog and snow, and they do have a lot of rain. We were very fortunate in that our tour, which was about 10 days, it did include a little bit of New Brunswick and some of Prince Edward Island, was about 10 days, a week, I should say, and then and some more that I added on to the end. Just a few pictures. There are plants that grow in these fens or bogs, if you want to call them. Even orchids, little tiny orchids. And it says you may hear, if you can't find the frog, he's right here. It sounds like you hear banjo strings. This is a little green frog. Some flowers coming up. And we do have, of course, wildlife as well. Moose are common. We did see one, but he was off pretty far, and of course lots of birds. Here's my one picture of a moose as big as I can get it, working in one of the lakes, and of course lots of birds. So they're trying to preserve this peat as it accumulates because it's very fragile, and it's protected in this national park. We also visited the Whale Museum, which is in the Highlands Park. And a little bit about them. They're called cetaceans. So I'm calling them crustaceans. Cetaceans, and we'll see a little bit more about them. They are air-breathing mammals with large heads that live in the water. And we know that they're mammals, and they have their young are born alive, and their skin is covered in skin rather than scales. And they swim by moving their horizontal flukes, which are at the back, up and down, instead of swimming with their tail fins from side to side. So here's how you tell what kind of whale is what. These are the baleen whales on this side, and they are the ones that filter their water. They have teeth that are not really teeth. They're just like little comb, like a comb, and they filter small objects through their teeth and eat small things like krill. So the largest is the blue whale that can get as big as 88 feet and 110 tons. That is one whopping whale. And the other type is called a toothed whale, and this is the kind that actually has teeth and bites. So the largest of these is the sperm whale, which grows to be about 60 feet and 60 tons. And the orcas or killer whales, which you're probably familiar with. They are of this type, and so are the different varieties of porpoises. They do bite. So whaling, of course, was an industry that was very common back in the old days because of the whale oil, and that they were becoming extinct, or would be if we didn't stop hunting them. So there was a world moratorium on them in 1986, and they have come back in most places. There are still about 22,000 whales that have been killed since it came into effect. The indigenous people are still allowed to do it, and some countries have not abided by that moratorium, that they still hunt whales. This is another interesting poster that was on the wall of the Sable Island, which is north of this area, and all the shipwrecks that have occurred along this island. So I think you have to be a little careful if you're boating in the area. Coming back from this northern part of the east coast of Cape Breton, and this is all going to be red leaves in the fall, and down to the ocean, and to Badek. And Badek is on Lake Brador. You said you didn't know how to pronounce it. That's how you pronounce it, Brador, and it means the Lake of Gold. So Badek is a very interesting town. It's very small.
Mary, can you speak a little bit louder, please? I've had some requests.
Well, you know me, don't speak loud. Let me turn this volume up. Does that help any?
Okay. Yes, thank you.
All right. I had turned it up, but apparently not enough. So, and we visited a sailboat ride on Lake Brador, and also the French fort of Louisburg. So this is our little lunch stop coming into Badek, and the view from the shore. And this is our hotel. Hotels tend to be this kind rather than maybe the large kind that you'll find in cities. They may have been homes in the past, or maybe built as homes, or built as hotels, but in this style, like a house. And then other additions were put in when tourism grew. But they have their little garden and a little patio to sit. Beautiful views everywhere, of course. There's a nice harbor into the lake with you see lots of sailboats. So we had a ride on this particular sailboat. And since they didn't put the sails up until we were on the boat, I don't have a picture of the boat with the sails up. I would have had to miss the trip in order to do that. We passed Lighthouse coming out. So it means the Lake of Gold, about 62 miles long, pretty far down the lake. And what's interesting about it is it's open to the sea, so it has tides that come in. It's partly freshwater and partly saltwater. But it has a lot of rivers that run into it, so it does have a lot of fish in it. It's part of the UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. So here we are. This is the boat with these two masts, as you see, that they're going to put their sails up after we get on the boat. And our captain, or whatever you call him, who gave us a beautiful ride on a beautiful day. As you can see, lots of boats out. We had a couple of stops. This was one of them called Cape Point, where there just didn't seem to be a lot of things around it. It was just a place to put boats in. There perhaps were hiking trails around it. There is a little beach over here. As you can see, most of it's pretty rocky. We also saw sea life as we came out, some of the birds that are on the rocks here, and some seals that have come in from the ocean. This house is the one that Alexander Graham Bell lived in summers. We're going to hear a lot more about him in just a minute, but that's what it looks like from the boat. This is his family. He was a teacher of the deaf in New York City, and he married one of his students. She became deaf after having scarlet fever, Mabel Hubbard, and their two daughters. They also had two sons who died as infants. And she was 15 when he met her, but he waited until she was 18 to propose to her. He was 10 years older than she was. Bell's mother was also deaf, and his father was a teacher of elocution, so he was always interested in the deaf, and he taught at the School for the Deaf in New York, which is where he met Mabel, and her father owned the school. So this is a close-up off of Google to show you what the house looked like. It is not open to the public, but it was built for them. I don't know who these people are. Maybe they were invited, but they are not. Don't have regular tours out there. This whole peninsula belongs to the Alexander Graham Bell family. There are other homes on it that were built by cousins, uncles, grandchildren, etc. So there are several other homes on this wooded property. Coming back into the town, met by bagpipers, which was what we often had. We had a number of bagpipers who met us, some in kilts, some not. This is the Alexander Graham Bell historical site. And he was an interesting man. Not only was he a teacher of the deaf, but he was an inventor of all sorts of things. And I was really amazed to see how many things he was working on, a wide variety. A little bit about him: he was born in Scotland, and his family moved about the time he graduated from high school. So they moved to New York, first to Canada and then to New York. But he always liked Canada and built this summer home. But he, of course, we know him as patenting the first practical telephone and co-founder of AT&T, or as Ma Bell, we used to call him, this is the Bell. Teacher of the deaf, married Mabel Hubbard. He was an American citizen, but he did come up to Canada every summer, and they loved being in the deck. Some posters about him, and this is not a readable one. The U.S. Issued a stamp for him, and some things that he invented. This was the first telephone, and he sort of he was tinkering around with it and couldn't quite get it to work, but his assistant happened to push a button and he could hear him all of a sudden. So within 9 years of this patent that he got on it, more than 150,000 people in the U.S. owned telephones. We knew a good thing when we saw it. But he worked on other things like this biplane about the time that the Wright brothers were working on airplanes as well. So he didn't get a patent in first. His plane was called the Silver Dart. You can see them dragging it through the snow right here. But look at all these other things. He had 18 patents in his name only, and 12 that he shared with collaborators. But all the different types of inventions that he was interested in. He invented a phonograph. Working on several vehicles. This is the hydroplane, the basic hydrofoil. All kinds of things to help the deaf as well, or to help them with breathing. He had medical things. These I found interesting. A metal field on a record. This is our basis for computers, for recorders, for hard drive disks, floppy disks, other magnetic media. But he just started doing some of the basic research on this. Didn't really follow through with that before he died, but in early air conditioning the same way. So other people then took some of his ideas and early experiments to actually develop the things that we're used to having now. And even research on hereditary, but just a wide variety of things. So this is a view from that museum, a very interesting place. Our next stop was Louisburg Fort, and this was a fort built by the French. As I say, the Acadians settled it first, but the English came in from time to time. There were several battles, and this fort was completely demolished and has been rebuilt. This is the picture that you saw is this part of it right here. You come in through this gate right here. But you see other buildings. There was a little town all around it and another bastion out on this end. It was built in the 1700s. Originally was a little fishing village here, and they constructed walls. This is the French now, between 1720 and 40. And by 40, they had built this pretty extensive fortress, actually two fortresses. So the British began besieging Louisburg in 1745. They captured the fort, but they had to return it after another war. They captured it again. This time they leveled it. So what you're looking at now is a partial reconstruction. What they found when they started digging through the stones later on was that the complete plans for this town, the whole town, the fortress and everything, a lot of the original stone was there. They had all the plans. So they built it from the original plans just like it was.
Wow.
So the idea was to have a village that looked like French colonial life in the 1700s, the farms, the homes, and everything. So now we would call it a living history museum. And what they're doing is they invite people to come in and experience what life would have been like in the 1700s. These are what these houses would have looked like. They sponsor a week-long summer camp for children as I say, for a week at a time. And these children learn French songs, and they cook French food, and they tend the animals and so forth. So these are just some of the buildings around here. At noon, they fire off the cannon, and we have the fife and drum corps playing here. You see the cannon up here, and the people waiting for the cannon to go off. And I did record it, but they took so long to do the cannon that I actually did not wait to hear it go off. But it finally did go off. It takes a while to load cannons. It's a wonder that they ever could fight any battles with the cannons they had. So I can play a little bit of it, but mostly what you're going to hear is the wind blowing. Let me see if I can get back at that. So they go through all this stuff to actually fire a cannon. As I say, I got tired of the whole thing and kind of gave it up for lost. So we're not going to hear the cannon in that little video clip. So these are some of the little farms that are there. They do have real animals. They grow crops. They have hay and stuff like that. You'll see various things. Some of the houses are open, and there'll be guides in there dressed in the period costumes that will tell us, or period dress, I should say, telling us about times, what it was like to live in those houses. This lady is showing us how to make lace. And I had no idea that making lace was this intricate with all these little bobbins with the different things that are intertwined. So she was in process of making lace. This was the military chapel in the big fort that you saw off to the side of the entrance. Of course, the fort was used to house soldiers and military staff. These are some of the walls that are still remaining, and of course farms were all through this area. On our way back from Louisburg to Halifax, we stopped for just a little while at the Mukwak Museum, which is the Indian Museum. This is what they were called. This is a huge, huge statue, like 30 feet tall, with a lot of things like indigenous people. So coming into Halifax, you see a picture of the Blue Nose sailboat. This is from the races that they had in Halifax, and the Blue Nose was a winner of the races that they were very proud of. So my sister and I are at this little place down on the shore, and we look very disgruntled. I'm not sure why. This is a better picture of us in Prince Edward Island. Maybe it was a better day. I don't know why. Anyway, the shoreline is an interesting place. We were housed right on in Marriott, right on the shore, and were able to experience all the eating facilities and the museums and so forth. One thing that I will show you, and it slopes up pretty high. it goes uphill, all these streets, and there is an older section of town that's very interesting with old homes. This is the fortress up here in Halifax, and you'll see more about that in a little bit. And I'm also going to talk about the Narrows, where the ships would come in to the commercial ships would come in to load and unload in just a minute. So
Mary, Stan just said that the Blue Nose, that sailing ship you just showed us, is on the Canadian dime.
Oh, I didn't know that. I know they have built another one, which you're going to see, but I'm glad to know that. Yeah, it's a very famous sailing boat. Thank you, Stan. Glad to know that. So this is along the Halifax waterfront, this being the Marriott Hotel. And as you go along, you'll see the ice cream shops, Cows, all through Canada. That's the best ice cream you can get. I don't know, Stan may, or Sandra may disagree with that, but I thought they're pretty good. I've had their ice cream other places. Lots of music, different people doing different things along the boardwalk. Also statues. Samuel Cunard was from Halifax, and he was the pioneer of steam navigation. Remember, we had sailing ships up till the 1840s, and he was an entrepreneur and got us set up with steam ships going across the ocean and the Cunard line. There are also other kinds of statuary along the line, this one being of bicycles. These buildings were old barracks for these soldiers, sailors, and there are now shops in the bottom of them and apartments up above, condos or whatever they are. But all along you'll see all different types of boats, and a fun place to be, or get your fresh lobster. The place to visit is the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic. And outside of it is this little IMAX theater built outside of it, and the Blue Nose 2, which is this ship. Also a sailing racer, and here's that museum right behind it. So the entrance to the museum looks something like this, and with the welcome signs. And this, I don't know how they get children in there moving past this. The pirates' fate was not a happy one. If they got caught, and of course there was piracy all along here, they would hang you up and leave your body there to rot. Not a nice thing. So as you come in, the first thing you see is the Lighthouse Lamp. They are big, big things. You see things about the Cunard line, and of course lots of different kinds of boats. Boats. This thing is what we would call a intercom system that goes all the way up to the Cunard office. They could use these on their boats that were more than one story. And even a live parrot. Here's what happens to shipwrecks. We might think that we go down and find shipwrecks, like we found the one in Antarctica not too long ago. But that is the exception to the rule. What happens to ships is they gradually disintegrate, as you see, until there's not a whole lot left of them. So if you think you have an idea to salvage something on a shipwreck, probably not going to happen. Lots of things that are related to ships and shipping, things you would use on a ship. These are coiled up in baskets. And of course, Halifax is the home of Canada's Navy, in the boats that, or ships that were out for World War II. And there are two interesting things about it. This is the fastest submarine in the world, first of all, battleship. I can't read it down here. And the next page has two images of Halifax, one from 1857, the other from 2009, that show you how it's changed. This being that citadel up on top, now you can barely see it, with the high rises along the harbor and a bridge, a little bit different. Little model of the Halifax, and I got to learn how to do my name in Morse code and got a certificate to show that I knew how to do it. There are two interesting things that happened in Halifax. One was this Halifax explosion in 1917, and the other is the Titanic. We'll hear about that in a second. So this explosion happened as Canada and U.S. were coming into World War II. in 1917, there was a huge explosion right in this region of two ships, one loaded with ammunition and the other bumping it and setting off a bomb, more or less. This is the part of Halifax that I was just showing you. This is the Narrows, but it did actually go over to the other side. So, some things about it. There were two ships involved, the Norwegian relief ship Imo and the French munition ship, the Mont Blanc. So Mont Blanc was carrying high explosives and caught fire and burned for about 25 minutes. So all these people are standing around looking at this fire. Not a good idea, because the petrochemicals that were stored below underwent a chemical reaction triggering this blast. And it tore through the ship at 1,500 meters per second. The steel hull just was fragmented. I'll show you some pieces of it, augmenting the impact of the blast. In an instant, Mont Blanc was transformed from a ship into a 3-kiloton bomb in a busy modern harbor. It discharged gases, drove water and debris everywhere, hot gas, over an 8-kilometer range of vaporized fuel and metal byproducts fell like rain, coating the wreckage with oily film. So one of the people, about 1,600 people were killed in this, 9,000 injured. This fellow was operating the telegraph at the time, that's Coleman, and he was told that the ship, he was close to the ship and found out that it was going to explode. So he got on the telegraph to the trains coming into Halifax and said, "Hold up the trains, boys, munition ship on fire, making for Pier 6, goodbye." And of course, he was blown up in the blast. So it did let the Canadian government know that help was going to be needed soon, and it prevented the trains from also being blown up that were coming in. And this is an idea of what it looks like. There are several pictures in various places showing what this looked like. Here's another little girl who was 12 at the time. She was watching the flames, and she was picked up by the wind, almost like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. She picked her up off the ground, and she ended up half a kilometer away, down where she lived. She saw only a wall of smoke and flame. And when she reached her aunt's house, she didn't recognize her black, limping figure. And when questioned about her parents, and 5 brothers and sisters said they're all gone. And she was right. Here's a piece of metal from the ship that got blown away. So, of course, that was a huge thing. Oops, I didn't want to show you that. Hang on. There's a huge thing in Halifax history. These are some before and after pictures. These are before and what it looked like afterwards. This reminds me of the scenes in Ukraine right now, what it looked like before and after from this explosion. The other big event, of course, was the Titanic, which hit an iceberg not too far from Halifax in 1912. There's a model of the ship in this museum. Shows you the icebergs with the Titanic heading towards Halifax. And a picture of the stairway. It was an elegant ship, of course, on its maiden voyage. This is what it looked like, probably an artist's depiction of what it would look like when it began to sink. And various pictures. The Cunard Line sent a ship to pick up, the Britannica, to pick up survivors. They were sent to Boston, and then the dead bodies were taken to Halifax, where they're buried in the cemetery there. Another museum just down the block from that is the Canadian Immigration Museum. This is a shipping case, and you can see that this family has shipped everything they want, including the kitchen sink. I mean, we talk about that, but there is actually a sink in the packing case of things in their immigration to Canada. And it shows various things about the immigration experience with one of the railroad cars and a telegraph office. So this is this citadel that I was showing you on the map, the fort that protected the city up on top of the city. And it was actually one of 5 forts that were along the shoreway, now historical sites with tunnels in, and pretty advanced for the Victorian era. And of course they had plenty. This is what the one in Halifax looks like, and the others. It was pretty advanced for its time, of course, with all kinds of cannons. So you see how it took a while to fire cannon, but they had them going one after the other. One of the most picturesque places in Canada, or Nova Scotia, is Peggy's Cove. When you see a flyer for come to Nova Scotia, you're probably going to see a picture of Peggy's Cove. Very photogenic. And it's just a haven for bus tours and photographers. It's a very small place. This is a picture of the village, or map of the village. About 35 people live here. The lighthouse at the end, and this huge restaurant to do service the lunch for the maybe 50 tour buses at a time that you'll see in the parking lot and back. But everywhere you look, there are just wonderful pictures to take. You can see that the tide is partly out at this point. But the fishing shacks, or where the fishing course being the main industry along here in Peggy's Cove. But especially when the water is still not lots of reflections in the water and pretty colors. Great place to take pictures. So we spent a little time in Peggy's Cove. This house over here has this fellow is a wooden statue with cod that he's holding, all carved in wood, and lobster pots, which of course are everywhere. If you're thinking about going up to Nova Scotia and catch you a few lobsters, you can forget that idea right away. Lobster fishing is very well regulated. There are only certain days and certain families that may go lobster fishing. And so there are only times of the year and certain days, and you have to have lived there several hundred years, and your family has to be a lobster fisherman. Not everybody can go catch them a lobster. If you want lobster, you go to a restaurant. So the lighthouse here is out on the rocks, also very photographed. This is the restaurant that serves millions of meals in their tower. Here are two of the guides. This is Lorne Sutherland, our guide. He has kilts as well that he wore to the farewell dinner, one of the other guides. Lots of Scots as guides and people in the shops. So the Scots are the other people who inhabited this island in addition to the Acadians. And I'll talk more about what happened to the Acadians a little bit down the road. If you're from the United States, you know that some of them came to the New Orleans area, and they're called Cajuns. But many were sent back to France, inhabited other parts of Nova Scotia, and were basically deported, which is a shame. But some of them are still around, and we'll see some as we go along. So our tour ended in Nova Scotia with a dinner, and I rented a car. I intended to be with two of my sisters, but only one was able to make it, as one had a problem at the last minute and couldn't come. So she was going to join me on this part of the tour, where I visited Lunenburg, which is another UNESCO heritage city, and Shelburne, and Pimlico, and Yarmouth, and back to Halifax in the Annapolis region. As you see, this is Annapolis, not our Annapolis, though. So this part is not on the tour of but one that I did on my own. This is a map of some of the lighthouses, and you see all these little coves have to have lighthouses. This is Lunenburg right here. There it is, Mahone Bay, and they have their museum there too. So Mahone Bay is just a cute little town. There are three churches there. I took a picture of this particular one so you can see some of the detail. The wooden cladding on it is vertical rather than horizontal, which you usually see in houses and buildings built of wood. Lots of interesting color combinations and decorated on it. You'll see lots of buildings like this one. So this is Lunenburg. This is the hotel I stayed at called the Rum Runners Inn. It was built way back in the 1800s, but it's been completely refurbished inside. Very, very nice. About, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 rooms. It's on the main street in Lunenburg. So as you go down the street, you will see lots of colored houses. It's up as the streets go up from the harbor, up one story from the harbor. But there is a way to get down there. What there isn't is parking lots. They didn't have parking lots back in 1800s. So there's no place to put your car except on the street if you want to stay there overnight. This is my hotel. So you have to wait till all the tourists go and then find a parking place. Lots of cute signs along the way too. This yellow one's where I was. Of course, the fish are everywhere. Here's the blue nose too. As I say, you'll see that again over and over. And the Nova Scotia store. This is what you can buy in Nova Scotia. All sorts of things aquatic. And the colored houses are everywhere. And of course, they are now UNESCO protected. And there are about 400 of these, about 6 by 8 blocks of them, just constant. As you see the uphill slant away from the harbor. So everywhere you look are these beautiful old homes, beautifully preserved in most cases. Some of them have little plaques on when they were built, and this was my only rainy day, and just a light rain. Some of the plaques you see, shipbuilder, baker, and the dates when these houses were built. This was known to be the oldest house. This little plaque would be right here, about 1760. Some beautiful churches, too. This is the Anglican Church in Lunenburg. And down on the harbor is the Fishery Museum. And, of course, a harbor with boats, a ship's bell, and a figurehead. So this is the Fisheries Museum of the Atlantic. Of course, lots of sailboats. The blue nose, too, on a hooked rug. This is the way they caught some of the fish, different ways of netting them. But they had other things besides fishery stuff. This would be an old clock, a sewing machine, a typewriter. Some of those will look familiar to us, lots of fossils from the area. This is a map of the rum running. I was in the Rum Runners Hotel, and there is a reason for that. During Prohibition, rum was produced in this area in Newfoundland, and outside of the boundary waters, you couldn't touch them. So they were running rum to Boston and New York and along this coastline. So leaving Lunenburg the next morning, the fog was still on the lakes and inlets. And though it may seem like not a good time to take pictures, some of them turned out really pretty. So my next stop was in Sherburne. And this is the place to go to see where boats are made in this museum down here. The Dory. The Dory is the main fishing boat that these fishermen of Nova Scotia used. And they're still being constructed here. This lady made this just as a little model for her grandchildren. But this is kind of the shape they were. They're flat-bottom boats, so they're not going to tip. This is a cardboard cutout of a fellow who worked at building dories his entire life, of something like 50 years. And he's the champion dory builder. He made 3 a week for 50 years. His lobster pot. This is a lobster just put on a board, shellacked. The size of them was pretty big. And the little town of Sherburne had a couple of things. That when a tree has to be cut down, they'll cut it and then carve something out of it. I saw this in other places in Canada, and maybe other places as well, but I have seen it in Canada a number of times. So this one being the British soldier. The Acadian Village that I visited was the one in East Pubnico, and you see directions of where these Acadians were sent, the Great Upheaval or the Grand Dérangement. So Acadia, established by France in 1604, was a highly coveted colony. But they were bumped out when the English came in, and they were sent back, as I said, to various places. But some returned, and this is the barony of Poboncourt, and he had several children, and several families then came back to this area, which is this peninsula of Pubnico. And the names of the towns are interesting. The one I stayed at or visited was where the Museum of the Acadians is, right here in East Pubnico. But there's West Pubnico and Southwest Pubnico and North Pubnico and various other Pubnicos along this side and the other side of this little bay. So this is when they came. This is when they actually settled. And then the English came to Nova Scotia. They moved all those Acadians and deported most of them, but as I say, in 16 53, some settled here and were not moved. So this area did have Acadians living in it even after that big deportation. Some old pictures from their museum there. And now there's a nice modern museum that you can visit that tells you all about it. And this would have been the national dress. Some folk singing in the visitor center. This is about the abattoirs that they built. And you saw that rugged coastline where you had some salt water, some marshes. And what they did was similar to what they did in the Netherlands. They fixed wooden sluices with swinging doors that allowed excess fresh water to drain out from newly claimed land. So they're claiming land from the marshes, the saltwater marshes, and then shut to prevent re-entry of the saltwater when the tides came in. So this is how they built these, and I'm not going to bore you with how that's done, but they did a lot with the saltwater marshes, reclaiming land there. This fellow right here found this millstone at the bottom of one of these marshes. So they did mill grains that they grew. Model ships, of course, in this museum. Old phonographs, wheels, boots. A big camera collection. If you're a camera collector, this would be a place to go to see. And then, of course, it's an outdoor museum, a living museum. This was a blacksmith shop, and he's working away on things with real people working there. This was the codfish that they dried and packaged to send all over the world. I'm not sure how that would taste. Some lobster pots out there. This fellow, you see the Dory. He's inside and he's making a fishing net. Again, a lobster pot. They are also farming this, real animals and farms, and he's feeding them, and the children are coming to watch. But you see all these little inlets and islands everywhere. And pigs. And the postmistress doesn't look too happy about me taking her picture. I'm not sure why. I wasn't nasty to her. This lady's much nicer to me, and showed me around the house. My grandma had a stove like that. I've showed you before, and visiting other old places. Quilts, of course, and all the things that you would expect from 1800s homes. The washboard, the pump. My grandma had those too. Old sewing machine. My mother had one of those. So this is the little one of the little lighthouses. This one is the East Pubnico Lighthouse. It has a little trail through there. If you follow it, you're going to come up to the top of the hill. And it's right here in Pubnico. Been moved a couple of times so the fishermen could see it too. And you see there's land on the other side that has Pubnico names as well. And then leaving it, you could see the mist on the waters and the So passing a lot of country churches, really pretty. You'll see a lot more in Yarmouth as we get to Yarmouth. These lovely churches. And looking across the water. So the town of Yarmouth, we are getting to the end of this, was my really, mostly last stop. And it's on this Gulf of Cape Fortune. It has a nice harbor. The lighthouse is at the end of this. Not very big town. And the downtown is not much to look at. This could stand a good coat of paint. So it was not a particularly attractive downtown. This is outside their art museum, a little restaurant. My hotel, again, a house type of hotel. Lake Lawn B&B, very comfortable. I was in one of the little extensions to it, like a motel. And the city park is right down on the water. I came in about dusk as I'd driven from Halifax that day, so I saw the park kind of at dusk. But lots of pretty hydrangeas and lilies and lots of flowers blooming. Fountain, sunset over the lake, or not lake, but the inlet. I did visit the county museum. That was always nice. This is too small to see, but shows some of the settlers. A little bit about it. So Champlain visited in 1604. He named it Cape Fortune, meaning forked or cloven cape. I didn't show you the map long enough. It looks like a little cloven hoof down at the end. And the Acadians, as we said, came first, and then the New England planters after who'd come from Massachusetts, so they named it Yarmouth, which is where they'd come from. It was a big shipbuilding town and home to many ship captains, which is what you want to know, because they built these beautiful, beautiful homes. And the industries now really are fishing and tourism. And there is ferry service, or there was at one time. I hope there still is. Ferries have come and gone. I'm not sure of the current ferry service. So, of course, the Lighthouse Light, which would be on a lighthouse like this. What I liked about this museum, again, is the little rooms that they had showing what life would have been like. Different types of rooms and clothes they wore and what kind of dishes they had and quilts they had and all that stuff. And a loom, and these made of matchsticks, somebody's hobby. But you really want to see in Yarmouth is the Victorian houses. I thought this was cute. The little bay window. Bay windows are very popular. You'll see them all over. So this is one house. This porch along this side is taken from the side. And they're a legacy of the wealthy captains and ship owners of the seafaring age. So this is one of these lovely side gardens, but you see the little bay windows and this trim that you'll see all over the houses. Different colors. This one's been turned into a B&B. This is like a Gothic house, almost looks like a church. This was the oldest house built in 1820, Regency Gothic, the home of Dr. Bond, the first doctor. So these are different styles, and a lot of them were combinations. This one you see the Gothic windows, but then kind of a Georgian door. So lots of times they combine these different house styles, and they ended up with some interesting things. This is called the Bishop's House, and it had about 5 entrances. And around the corner, this is this end of it. Look at the siding on the side of this house, and this window would be around the corner here. Stained. Some more of these pretty color combinations and bay windows, gardens, all different colors. This is the Anglican Church. Somebody's birdhouses. We think we didn't have enough birdhouses. Look at all the combinations these birds have. And of course you have to take a trip out to the end of the Cape to see the lighthouse. And this kind is called an apple core type of lighthouse, shaped like an apple core. And foggy, early in the morning. It's the fog is still on. You can't even see the end of the Cape. But there are hiking trails all along here. And actually, again, that fog made for some very pretty pictures. I didn't put all of them in, but this is one of my favorites. Just a foggy place to sit and watch. Then coming back along the Cape, all these fishing boats out, ready to get out and do their thing. And along the way, another one of these churches. So this is this road across the north end of western Nova Scotia. This is farmland. It's orchard and land. There are a lot of apple orchards and different kinds of fruit. And of course, along this coast is going to be the Bay of Fundy and fishing villages. So it doesn't go immediately along the coast, but you can turn in various points, and I turned in at Harborville just to see it. That you see what the tide is out, what it looks like when it's out. The Bay of Fundy has the biggest tides in the world. The far end, the tides can go up as high as 30 feet. So you see this is not quite that high at this point, but they do have pretty big tides. And there are tide schedules, of course, for when you can get in and out. So I'm going to leave you now and say goodbye to Nova Scotia and hope that you get a chance to visit sometime. As you can see, I just loved it and took lots of beautiful pictures. You only saw about half of them. I spared you about 100 of slides that I cut out yesterday. So it's a fun place to go on your own. You don't have to go on a tour, but the tours are really, they do very well as well.
Wow. Well, don't. Okay. Let me move the chat section because there were quite a few little questions. Let me get to the beginning. Can everybody see that or just me? Let's see. Well, let me start at the end because that's closest to what everybody just saw. This is from Susie. Shui, when we were in Yarmouth, we took the Blue Nose Ferry to Bar Harbor.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, the Bar Harbor was listed, and then my latest one was that it was discontinued, and then it was on again and off again, and so I don't know the status of the one from Bar Harbor at this point. That's why I'm saying I'm not sure about the ferry schedules. I would say if you wanted to go by ferry from the U.S. to check where they're running from and the schedules, because they haven't always run. I think during the pandemic they were not running, or some of them were not running. So what's on again, I don't know.
I took that ferry from Bar Harbor to Yarmouth, I suppose. I was a child, but we saw some whales on that little journey. It was quite memorable.
There are whales all around Nova Scotia.
Yeah, Jack did a personal chat to me. It's like, okay, we need to put Nova Scotia on our list of places to go. Let's see. All right. Oh, yeah, and he thanked you for it. Would cycling be an option for traveling around Nova Scotia? Guess who that was from?
Yes, if you can do hills. You notice some of them are pretty high ascents. The roads are pretty narrow as well. I would say canoeing and hiking would be better options. The little girl that I showed you that had two little girls of 12-year-olds and their moms. The dads and the two boys were also on this trip with them, but they were in a car or cars. And they were doing hiking and canoeing and kayaking and stuff during the day most of the time, while we were doing other things. Sometimes the moms were with them, but mostly the moms and girls were with us. And then they ate dinner with us at night and, paid their own way.
Okay.
So I heard a little bit more about what other people were doing that were not on the tour. And there are lots of options. If you look at some of the tourism things from Nova Scotia, there are plenty of things you can do on your own. You wouldn't have to go on a tour, particularly if you wanted to do something like bicycling.
Okay. Did the roads have bike lanes or shoulders at least?
No, they did not. They were just
one
way each way, not even two-way roads.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
The western, when I was in a car, there is a highway that's 2 lanes each way for part of the way, but most of the lanes are country road kind of lanes.
Okay. Let's see. Stan and Sandra said the lighthouse, and I'm not sure which one he was talking about. He might want to weigh in. He said that has been redesigned and there are now walkways. Stan, or Sandra, you want to address that?
Which walkway?
Yeah, you used to be able to go right out on the rocks.
You can.
Peggy's Cove.
You can.
But now they've restricted it. There's a walkway and you have to stay on the walkway.
Well, I did see those paths, and since I had a long drive, I didn't go on that walkway. I did see the hiking paths, but there were people on the rocks as well.
This isn't a hiking path. It's a new way of seeing Peggy's Cove. It was just done last year with a visitor center and whatever.
Oh, you're talking about Peggy's Cove or about Yarmouth?
Peggy's Cove.
Peggy's Cove. Oh, okay. Well, they were on the rocks as you saw the people in the pictures in 2019. I don't know what they're doing now.
Okay. Sandra got to sleep in Louisburg. Yeah. Is there a story, Sandra?
Oh yeah, there's a story. Sandra didn't know what
whoops, we can't
up for. And I wound up. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
no.
You can't hear me?
Well, now we can.
Okay. Yeah, so I wound up sleeping in one of those reproductions 18th century homes and living as if I lived there at the time.
Yeah.
So there was no light and no bathrooms and no food, and in the morning you had to get up and make a fire and cook things, and it was very, very challenging.
And in the
how long?
She had to feel her way in the dark to a washroom.
Yeah. Well, to a tree.
How long did you do that?
One night.
Yeah.
They had to get special permission because nobody, insurance-wise, nobody is allowed to
Yeah, well, these kids are there for a week. They find out what
be
it's like to not
in
have
the houses overnight.
TV and lights, as you say, the whole thing. That'd be fun for them. Good experience for kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, that the camp sounded really interesting.
Yeah.
It really did.
They have it there, and they have it at a place called King's Landing in New Brunswick. There's two of them out there.
Yeah, I know not as much about New Brunswick. We went to that very end of where the Bay of Fundy comes in, the standing.
Moncton.
Yeah,
Moncton. Yeah.
So went down on the ocean floor. The tide was completely out, so we could.
Yes. You know what they do there now? They actually serve a meal on the ocean floor. You know, it's always a bigger challenge of getting the visitors there. So they put tables out, you eat, and then you got to run before the tide comes in.
Right, that was kind of interesting though. So I didn't want to include too much. This was long enough as it was, as you see. And but yeah, Prince Edward Island, of course, was the home of the House of Seven Gables author, and that is
Anne of Green Gables.
Sorry, Anne of Green
Yeah.
Gables.
Yeah.
I just want to comment that I was in Cape Breton Island 50 years ago with my family in a camper. I mean, we pulled a camper behind us, and I never forgot. It was beautiful. If you've never been to Cape Breton Island, going around that Cabot Trail it's like being in Scotland. Really reminded me of Scotland. And but what I remember most is, because we were campers and you had to go to bathrooms, you know, it was, the campground was run by the Canadian government, and it was pristine. It was so clean. It was the cleanest campground I've ever been in all my life, was at Cape Breton Island. And then we were there in the summer, of course, because the girls were in school. And we, at Shetty Camp, they had a big festival. And I remember all the drum, you know, the Scotsmen and their drummers and so forth. So I have really wonderful memories 50 years ago of Cape Breton Island. And I would encourage anybody to go there if they've never been to Cape Breton Island.
I'm glad you brought up the parks. Parks Canada has done an amazing job of developing different kinds of sleeping arrangements in their parks. It's very, very easy to get around anywhere in Nova Scotia. The people are so friendly. But in Parks Canada, they actually have little buildings you can stay in and yurts you can stay in. And I slept in a bubble, it's called an ovo, I think, that hangs from a tree in the sky. But they've all different options because they're really trying to get people, you know, to get into the woods and enjoy nature. So I would look into if you're looking for places to stay, don't skip the Parks Canada sites.
Absolutely. I'm thinking again about the bicycling around Bador Lake. It's fairly flat around the lake, but it doesn't stay that way for very long. Yeah, most of Nova Scotia is pretty hilly, but if you're a cyclist.
Well, that's why when somebody was talking about cycling, I'm thinking I wouldn't want to be cycling up Cape Breton Island around that Cabot Trail unless they're really in good shape.
Well, not only in good shape, but the roads are narrow. You got these tour buses coming around, and the roads are just one way each way, so there's not a lot of room. They're not paved sides.
There's also a way to do it, and I forget. You have to check it. It's either clockwise or.
You can go either way.
I know, but it's a suggestion.
Yes,
do it because of the light, and you're not on the edge. If you go clockwise, you're on the inside, but if you go counterclockwise, you're on the outside by the water. It can get knocked in. that kind of thing.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Sandra, because I was sitting here thinking, I know there's a way you're supposed to have gone. We did it the way they suggested. It was also more beautiful, the way you would come up. And I don't know which side I don't remember, but.
Yeah.
Well, we did clockwise.
We did it both. We did it both ways. Actually, 3 ways.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. That it's beautiful anywhere you go, which I believe. And as you see on the road on my screensaver here, It's not right at the edge of the cliff. So nowhere was it right at the edge.
Some places it is.
If you ever drove anyone who's driven like a US 1 in California, it feels like that. You've got the ocean on one side and the mountains on the other. But I think
yeah, 1 is a lot closer to the ocean than this was. Do we have any
Well, that was a wonderful program. My goodness. You covered a lot of territory.
We did. Well, I wanted to see the other part of Nova Scotia that the tour didn't cover, and my sister was supposed to go with me, and we were going to meet a friend from Ottawa in Yarba, and she ended up breaking her leg. my sister, wasn't able to go at the last minute, and this lady broke her leg, and so, I was the Lone Ranger, and I thought, well, I might as well just go do it. I'm here. I made all the reservations. I'm never going to get back probably. So I just went ahead and did it on my own. But it's,
good for you. Well, they're wonderful pictures. Some of the ones with the mist were gorgeous. Yeah. Gorgeous pictures. Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
There's something about Nova Scotia that when people go there, they want to live there, and they wind up buying vacation houses and whatever. And in fact, one of them has the website when people were unhappy about U.S. elections, and it was called something like "If
Canada,
Trump wins," and they had thousands and thousands of people wanting to move to Nova Scotia at that time, and lots of people did.
In Shetty Camp, they're telling us that they're facing northwest, and they have winds 100 miles and more during the winter, every winter. I mean, not just. The winds are very, very strong, and everything's tied down with cables. I mean, you just blow away, and it's very cold, below zero for months on end. And even in the summer, 80 was the high. That was their heat wave, and they usually have rain. If you go up there, you can expect rain. I had only the one day in Lunenburg, which was very unusual. So,
which is something to keep in mind if you wanted to bicycle.
Yes.
Yes. So I'm keeping that in mind to tell Jack. Yeah. I would be driving the car, and I'd be the sag wagon, and he could be on his bike.
Well, I would check out where you would want to bike if you want to bike in Nova Scotia. A lot of it would not be appeal to me. I'm used to bike too, but I don't do up. It has to be pretty flat for me to want to bike.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, that was tremendous.
Rockies and stuff, but not me.
All right. Well, any other questions for Mary on the program?
I'm sure I'll think about it. I've forgotten, but anyway, that's what I remember today.
Well, thank you so much.